How does every Scottish joke start? By looking over your shoulder. Scottish preacher to his congregation: I don't mind you putting buttons in the collection plate, but please provide your own buttons. Stop pulling them off the church cushions. Do you know the first people in the UK to have double glazing were the Scots? It was so the bairns couldn't hear the ice cream vans. What's the difference between a lawnmower and a bagpipe? You can tune a lawnmower. A visitor to an Aberdeen bar was surprised to find the beer only 2p a pint. The barman explained that it was the price to mark the centenary of the pub opening. The visitor noticed, however, that the bar was empty. Are the regular customers not enjoying the special prices? To which the barman replied, they're waiting for the happy hour. Why are Scotsmen so good at golf? They realize that the fewer times they hit their ball, the longer it will last. Why wasn't Jesus born in Glasgow? Because God couldn't find 3 wise men and a virgin. A Glasgow woman goes to the dentist and settles down in the chair. Comfy? Asks the dentist. Govern, she replies. A Scotsman took a girl for a romantic ride in his taxi. She was so beautiful he could hardly keep his eye on the meter. Why do pipers march when they play? Because a moving target is hard to hit. Have you heard the rumor that the Grand Canyon was started by a Scotsman who lost a coin in a ditch? 2 soldiers, one English and one Scot, had been captured by Iraqis and were condemned to death. They were allowed one last wish. First they asked the Scotsman, who said, I'd like to hear 1,000 bagpipes playing Flower of Scotland. Then they asked the Englishman, who said, shoot me first. What do you call a Glaswegian in a suit? The accused. Scots are unique in that they can take the 2 instruments that annoy the most people in the world and place them in the route same band, drums and bagpipes. Winters can be extremely cold in northern Scotland, so the owner of the estate felt he was doing a good deed when he bought earmuffs for his farm worker Archie. Noticing, however, that Archie wasn't wearing the earmuffs even on the coldest day, the owner asked, didn't you like the earmuffs I gave you? Archie replied, not wishing to upset his employer, they are a wondrous thing. Then why don't you wear them then? Archie explained, I was wearing them the first day, but somebody offered to buy me a drink and I did hear him. In some Scottish restaurants they heat the knives so you can't use too much butter. An American was hopelessly lost in the Highlands and wandered about for nearly a week. Finally, on the 7th day he met a kilted inhabitant. Thank heaven I've met someone, he cried. I've been lost for the last week. Is there a reward out for you? Asked the Scotsman. No, said the American. Then I'm afraid you're still lost, was the reply. Another Scottish preacher is said to have prayed thus after a particularly unproductive collection: We thank you, Lord, that the plate was returned safely. Angus called in to see his friend Donald to find he was stripping the wallpaper from the walls. You're decorating, I see. To which Donald replied, no. I'm moving house. Hotel reception: Are you here for a special occasion? We won the 3rd prize in the annual Robert Burns contest, a haggis dinner for 2. Hotel reception: What were the other prizes? The 2nd prize was a single haggis dinner, and, if you won the 1st prize, you didn't have to eat the haggis. MacDougall walked into a fish and chip shop. I want 10p worth of chips, please. I want lots of salt and vinegar on them and 2p worth of pickled onions. And wrap the whole lot in today's newspaper. What do you call a Scotsman in the knockout stages of the World Cup? A referee. What's the difference between Scotland and a tea bag? The tea bag stays in the cup longer. Have you heard about the lecherous Scotsman who lured a girl up to his attic to see his etchings? He sold her 4 of them. An Englishman and a Scotsman go to a pastry shop. The Englishman whisks 3 cookies into his pocket with lightning speed. The baker doesn't notice. The Englishman says to the Scotsman, you see how clever we are. You'll never beat that. The Scotsman says to the Englishman, watch this, a Scotsman is always cleverer than an Englishman. He says to the baker, give me a cookie, I can show you a magic trick. The baker gives him the cookie which the Scotsman promptly eats. Then he says to the baker, "Give me another cookie for my magic trick." The baker is getting suspicious, but he gives it to him. He eats this one too. Then he says again, "Give me one more cookie." The baker is getting angry now, but gives him one anyway. The Scotsman eats this one too. Now the baker is really mad, and he yells, "And where is your famous magic trick?" The Scotsman says, "Look in the Englishman's pocket." What's the difference between Cinderella and the Scotland football team? Cinderella wanted to get to the ball. What do you call a Scotsman with diarrhea? Braveheart. Why are so many Scottish churches circular? So nobody can hide in the corners during the collection. Man walks into a Glasgow pub and asks for a pint of lager with a dash of lime. "We don't do cocktails," replies the barman. Man lost in Edinburgh says to a policeman, "Excuse me, is there a B&Q in Leith?" Policeman replies, "No sir, but there are 2 Ds and 2 S in Dundee." A Glasgow woman goes to the dentist and settles down in the chair. "Comfy?" asks the dentist. "Govern," she replies. A Scotsman decided to get married, so one morning he sent messages to 3 of his girlfriends, proposing marriage. 2 phoned immediately to say yes, while the 3rd phoned that night to say the same. He married the 3rd girl, saying, "The lass for me is the one who waits for the cheap rates." How can you tell if a bagpipe is out of tune? Someone is blowing into it. A Scotsman won a toilet brush as the booby prize in a raffle. He had never won anything before, though, so he was delighted. A few weeks later, a friend asked if he was getting much use from the toilet brush. "Well," came the reply, "I don't think much of it. I think I'll go back to using toilet paper." The Scots have an infallible cure for seasickness. They lean over the side of the ship with a 10-pence coin in the teeth. What's the difference between a smart Scottish man and a unicorn? Nothing, they're both fictional characters. You should be careful about stereotyping the Scots as mean. There was a recent letter to a newspaper from an Aberdonian which said, "If you print any more jokes about mean Scotsmen, I shall stop borrowing your paper." After discovering that they had won £15 million in the lottery, Mr. and Mrs. McFlannel sat down to discuss their future. Mrs. McFlannel announced, "After 20 years of washing other people's stairs, I can throw my old scrubbing brush away at last." Her husband agreed, "Of course you can, Hen. We can easily afford to buy you a new one now." Why do the Scots make better lovers than the Germans? Because Scots are the only ones who can stay on top for 45 minutes and still come second. When a bus company was prevailed upon to increase the concessionary fare to frequent travellers so that they got 6 journeys instead of 4 for £1, one elderly gentleman, renowned for his frugality, even in a community where frugal folk are common, was still unhappy. "It's all damn foolishness," he declared. "Now we've got to walk to town 6 times instead of 4 times to save £1. McNabb had become a bit hard of hearing, but he didn't want to pay for a hearing aid. So bought a piece of flex, put one end in his top pocket and the other end in his ear. It didn't help his hearing, but he found that people spoke to him more loudly. Why were the 2 Scottish gals travelling in London pissed off? Because they found out that Big Ben was a clock. McTavish took his girlfriend out for the evening. They returned to her flat just before midnight, and as she kissed him goodnight, she said, "Be careful on your way home. I'd hate anyone to rob you of all the money you've saved this evening." By mistake, Sandy put a 50-pence coin instead of 5 pence on the collection plate at church. Despite his entreaties, the minister refused to give it back to him. So for the next 9 weeks, when the plate was passed round, he passed it on saying, "Season ticket." Sandy suggested a candle-lit dinner last night, Jessie reported to her friend the next day. "That was dead romantic," said her friend. "Not really. It just saved him having to fix the fuse." Jock asked the bus conductor how much it would cost to travel into town. 80 pence, said the conductor. Jock thought this was a bit steep, so he decided to run after the bus for a few stops. "How much now?" he asked. "Still 80 pence." Jock ran after the bus for another 3 stops and, panting, he asked, "How much now?" The conductor replied, 90 pence. "You're running in the wrong direction." MacDonald was awarded £10,000 for injuries received after a traffic accident, and his wife got £2,000. A friend asked how badly injured his wife had been in the accident. MacDonald replied, "Och, she wasn't injured, but I had the presence of mind to kick her in the leg before the police arrived." It is rumored that the entire population of Aberdeen took to the streets with an empty glass in their hands when the weather forecaster said there would be a nip in the air. There was understandable skepticism when it was suggested that Napoleon Bonaparte was the grandson of a Scot from Balloch, but now it has been pointed out that there is further proof that Napoleon was indeed Scots. His hand was always under his lapel, to make sure no one had lifted his wallet. Why aren't the Scotland football team allowed to own a dog? Because they can't hold on to a lead. A Scotsman visited London for his annual holiday and stayed at a large hotel. However, he didn't feel that the natives were friendly. At 4 o'clock every morning, they hammered on my bedroom door, on the walls, even on the floor and ceiling. Heck, sometimes they hammered so loud I could hardly hear myself playing the bagpipes. What do you call 6 weeks of rain in Scotland? Summer. Thank you for your visit, and please subscribe for more funny stuff.